Mackie McDonald, who was the CEO, he said at VF, we like to fail, but we like to fail fast. But I'm successful because the leaders that I was working with allowed me to make those mistakes and then learn from them.
Today, we're joined by Aaron Battista, a managing partner at the Ember Company, advising top organizations on growth and customer experience. He is the CEO of Battista Company, a retail industry leader with over 25 years of experience shaping global brands. He's currently the Chief Retail Officer at TRP Company.
Does that ever get taken into consideration beforehand, or is it always like a post-mortem conversation? We talk about it only once it's happened and how expensive it's been.
Probably not, because everybody's moving so quickly and then they have to post-mortem and debrief after, like, why didn't this person work out or what could we have done? I think when you're in a more organized company that has a human resources department that's
Hi, Aaron. Thank you for coming to my podcast today to speak. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You and I have known each other for a few years now, and I just think you have one of the most interesting backgrounds and really on board with your philosophy on leading and people and managing talent. So thanks for coming today.
there's a lot of like-mindedness on this call. Thank you for the invitation. I'm so excited to be a part of this. I'm so excited that you're doing a podcast. I think this is great. I'm looking forward to these questions and this conversation. So bring it on.
I won't put you in the hot seat, but it will be
No
fun.
worries. You can. You can.
Great. Well, if you could introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about your background.
Aaron Battista, I have been in retail operations for as long as I can remember, which is a long, long time. Education is in psychology and organizational development. I graduated from the University of Massachusetts, where I actually just went back and had a conversation with 70 business students UMass last week. It was great. The questions were incredible, tied to leadership, tied to what we're probably going to be talking about today. I started out in department store in an executive training program and then just moved through some incredible brands and was able to kind of learn and lead and be parts of some really cool things. And then in 2013 started an advisory firm, so from operator to advisor, and have been doing that ever since.
Well, I'm sure you have some amazing war stories, if you will, to share with us. What are some of these brands that you worked with and what can we learn from them?
Just the list is incredible. Some of them, they're great expansions, which were the Body Shop Group, Swatch Group, Lucky Brand, Denim, Seven for All Mankind, and Vince, just to name a few, but it goes on and on. Have worked with incredible brands like Dylan's Candy Bar, MoMA Museum Stores, Vince, Rebecca Taylor, Black Denim, Gucci. As thinking through all of these, it's coming back to me now.
Yeah, no, I remember when premium denim became a thing. I mean, it wasn't, buying designer jeans wasn't really always accessible to everyone before. And then Seven for All Mankind came and really changed the industry.
Yeah, it sure did. I learned the ropes at Lucky Brand for sure. Gene and Barry, the founders, wore everything denim. And when I had worked there for about 7 years and received a call from Mike Ejek, who was the CEO of Seven for All Mankind at the time, and Peter Corral was the founder, to come over to Seven for All Mankind to help them expand retail. And it was so exciting because it was predominantly a wholesale business with a tiny bit of e-commerce, which is the strangest thing to say. It was sort of in the world of, the development of e-commerce, and was given just this incredible opportunity to kind of white paper a retail expansion, taking from all the learnings from the past, from Gucci, Body Shop, Lucky forward. And one of the exciting things about Seven for All Mankind was not knowing where the retail expansion was going to lead. So in the first year, we literally did a flagship, a neighborhood store, a mall, an outlet, and a pop-up, all in year one to really test the market and see where the consumer was. So that was a great time. A lot of excitement.
Yeah, and it sounds like they gave you the space to test and explore.
They did. I had incredible partners. I was working with Ember Co on the real estate side of things, and just the ability to have a lab, if you will, of what was going to be sort of like expansion for Seven for All Mankind, and come to find out it is, flagship mall and neighborhood predominantly, with a little outlet here and there, and then activating pop-ups. So it kind of reinforced what had been done in the past, but was really a great way to show the brand's flexibility.
And I imagine to support all this growth, I mean, obviously you need teams on the ground. What did you bring in from your experience at Lucky into Seven, and what new things did you learn in order to, support that kind of expansion?
That's a great question. The team, it was the most important part of all of this. From an operator, Mandy, to visual, David, to, marketing, Leilani, just an incredible group of people came together to be able to do this. It wasn't me who expanded this brand. It was this team, this well-organized team. And, it started by having an incredible CEO and CFO that just got it. They were like, okay, we have to do this. We were acquired very early on from VF Corporation. And Eric Wiseman was the CEO at the time, who was really keen on expanding the contemporary brands division. They had acquired Splendid, Ella Moss, which I also worked with. They had John Varvatos, and they put together this sort of coalition of contemporary brands.
And when you say they just got it, like what vision do they have in terms of the role of talent and such an
The
expansion?
ability to make decisions, to put teams and talent together. It wasn't to be overindulgent, but really having people who could execute. I always go back and I think about um, Paul Sharon, who was the CEO. And I know I'm jumping around with names and stuff, but these are folks that are mentors and taught me a great deal. He was the CEO of Liz Claiborne, and he was all about inventory management, operational excellence, and precise execution. And you really need all three of those things in a retail environment to expand. And you have to put teams around that are able to do it.
And what are some of the things you learned about high functioning teams?
They need to be able to express themselves. They need a voice. They need their platform to be heard. It's really interesting. You have to integrate marketing into finance, into operations, into human resources, to be able to have everything sort of come together, because you never know what's going to be around the corner, especially in a new brand expansion. The store design was paramount. The understanding of the buys and the allocations, and very different from a wholesale assortment, a retail assortment, and putting together accessories. All of those things were it was a leadership team that knew you needed to do it and allowed you to do it, which was great.
And how does that look structurally? Like what do leaders who make that space available for their teams, what does that look like in terms of leadership skills? Like what skill is needed to do that?
It's not always title, right? It's allowing people to grow. And I always say, you want people to grow both vertically and horizontally. And it isn't necessarily going out and finding the person. It's actually finding the person who is learning, who has the background, but may not have done quite, sort of a formal expansion.
What do you think is something people get, or actually, let me be specific. What is something that executives can get wrong about people and talent management? If they don't get it, it's quite detrimental.
Again, it plays to who you are as a leader, and listening, and really paying attention and making yourself available. Being a leader who says they know their team, but actually doesn't spend time with them, doesn't spend quality time in the business with them, it's really hard to say you know them. and also pushing people. I love, and personally, to be a little uncomfortable, to be in a room where I know I don't know what's going to happen, but to be a part of something to try to figure it out. And I had never been given that much responsibility to kind of bring a brand to life, if you will. A lot of the businesses I'd worked in, obviously Gucci, the Body Shop, Lucky Brand, they were established. There were stories. There was an organization. At Seven for All Mankind, it was really building an organization.
Are these skills you could teach leaders? I'm just gonna take my glasses off
Oh,
because I feel like there's.
absolutely. They're actually skills you need to allow leaders to acquire. You want them to take a look at different parts of the business. You want them to be involved in things that, you may not necessarily be so well versed in, but you should be sitting with the technology teams, with the marketing teams, with the finance teams, and really fine tuning your acumen. So it's more of a generalist in a sense of being allowed to engage in other parts of the business.
So you're talking about a very well-rounded leader of leaders. And I also feel like you're already hinting at something that now has like a more formal term, which is like psychological safety, where you said like giving people the chance to think and come up with their own ideas. Also sounds like make mistakes as well. What are your thoughts on psychological safety, the role that plays and in a company and its growth?
I think about this, VF, my first meeting with Mackie McDonald, who was the CEO at the time before Eric Wiseman took over, Mackie retired. He said, listen, at VF, we like to fail, but we like to fail fast. And it's an interesting thing to think about, to hear that. You have to make mistakes because you're going to make mistakes. I'm a product of all the mistakes that I've made. I'm literally successful because of the mistakes I've made, but I'm successful because the leaders that I was working with allowed me to make those mistakes and then learn from them. And I think that plays a really big part. You need to have somebody who um, is empathetic to that learning curve.
Well, just pivoting a bit. So now you're in an advisory role. I'm sure a lot of opportunities come across your desk. And, when you're evaluating a potential investment, where in all that does the people piece come in? How can you evaluate that? What sort of assessments do you do when you are looking at the people or talent function or philosophy of a company?
As an advisor, I worked alongside great groups in the advisory world, like the Dallimore Company and now Ember Company, which I'm a managing partner of. When we get a project or when a project is a possibility, it's thinking through the people part of it. For me, that's where I spend most of my time. Other people spend it on the strategy, other people spend it on the finance. I spend a lot of it on the people and understanding where everyone is in an organization at the moment. Are they in the right roles? Are there roles that are missing? Are there roles that are overindulgent for the size of the business, but the right talent is there? It's really thinking through that part of it. I tend to do a lot of assessment work, which is a lot of interviews, a lot of time spent having conversations with teams to really understand where they are in the business and where they think the business is. Because if those things are at odds, that's a starting point.
And do you see that come up? Like maybe, do you ever instance where on paper, maybe financially it looks very attractive, or from a strategic standpoint, it makes sense, but it's, the people piece is missing and you could see like, this is not a good situation. It's not a.
Yeah, that's hard. If you think about whether it's an acquisition or whether it's an investment, it's getting to the people to really understand what's on that piece of paper, to validate it. A lot of times paper does look great, right? You paper well, but
Paper is a
how
verb.
is your day to day, right? Like, yeah, how is your
Mhm.
day to day? What's the culture? What is the actual group? Are they all moving in the same direction?
And what are some questions that you ask when you're trying to get to the bottom of culture?
You know what? It's as easy as tell me about the culture. Tell me about your ability to maneuver, to function in the culture of a company like this. A lot of it, especially if you're in a technology environment or if you're in a fashion environment, the questions they're gonna be a little bit different, right? Because the style, the culture, to me, it's really important of equality of opportunity. And we can get into that a little bit more, but I really personally like to be parts of brands where there is equality of opportunity, where, you know, everyone has the ability to either move up or move side to side and see themselves in the company for a longer period of time than where a lot of this sort of fast paced moving and turnover happens. I really like more stability.
Interesting. And do you think quality, equality in that way plays a role in that and leadership turnover and stability?
I think it does. I think fairness, people feeling valued. I'm spending a lot of time now with women in business and female entrepreneurs, and it is a really exciting place to be. Some of the most incredible mentors that I've had in my career have been women in business, and they have really taught me quite a bit. So I like to be able to see that in an organization, and also demand that from an organization. Anita Roddick, Angela Ahrens, Dawn Mello, um, Suzanne Lerner, just incredible women in business and mentors along the route. And that has shaped me when I'm asking questions in projects that I'm working in.
And when you see these culture gaps, is there a way to hone in on it, or can it be fixed? And what are ways that you fix it for companies that like otherwise you think there's a lot of potential and this could be a derailer for them if it doesn't, you say you demand it sometimes. So
Yeah,
what are ways that you
it's
could do
it's
that?
very direct. When there's been this sweeping sort of like anti DEI movement, it's heartbreaking and it's actually soul crushing. So you have to be better than that. You have to work around it and work through it, and that is making sure that the hiring process, the training process, the access to leaders is there, and it's very clear. And I think that is the responsibility of leadership today.
And so, in what ways can they operationalize that, leaders? Is it a function of having the right HR policies in place? Is it a matter of training? Like, if you could construct a program, what would that look like?
It's all of the above. I think it starts with the culture of your business. Is that who you are and who you want to be? And why wouldn't you? And then I think it starts with the process of engagement and interviewing and talent assessing. I use that a lot, but it's looking at your organization and seeing where can you strengthen it. Where can you strengthen it by having a more universal mindset, a more global um, population? We really talk about globalized things, but it's really important today that people have a worldly point of view, that they're looking at their story and their culture and their brand as something that has meaning, not just to a certain segment, but to everyone that you're talking about this business to.
Yeah. I mean, what comes across to me whenever you talk about this, and so I find you so inspiring, is like earnest is not the word, passionate is not the word, but like I feel like you feel so strongly about it. And for you, businesses are not merely, or brands for that matter, are not merely profit engines. Like I feel like it's bigger than that for you. I mean, what keeps you so passionate about this space, and why is it important to you?
Yeah, the relationship that I've always had with retail
Okay.
is the people part of it. Always. The storytelling, the we have beautiful product and you have a desire for this product. How do you make that engagement special? How do you make those conversations special? So to me, it's the value of the people in a brand. When I'm hiring or bringing people to a business, you want to bring them to a business that you're proud of. You want to bring them to a place where they can thrive, they can prosper. And it's not always financial. And that's where it's really a challenge. When you're working with private equity or you're working with VCs, and EBITDA is, what they want to name their next child. And it's like, well, wait a second. The reality is people came to this brand, yes, for financial reward, but also because they're bringing their heart and soul to it. They found something really inspiring about the story. They love the product. They love the consumer. They love hospitality. They want to provide experiences. And when you stymie that, or when you put pressure on that, I don't think you're as great as you should be.
Wow. Yeah, it feels like the word stewardship comes to mind. It seems like leaders have like a responsibility to yeah, to keep this dialogue or this very intimate relationship you're describing with the consumer and to honor it. And like you said, it's not financial. So when you are dealing though with people who are financially minded, how I feel what you're trying to convey here, but like how do you convey that if it's not so measurable? When like say you need resources to train your team or you
Yeah,
need to hire,
it's
yeah.
so interesting. It's whether or not you have a brand promise and whether you break that brand promise. And I will challenge people when they break the brand promise. And the brand promise isn't just to the consumer, it's to the people working in your business. So I very much get involved in that. Fortunately, when you're in a leadership role, you have a voice. It's just whether you choose to use it, whether you're even in tune to it. And I try to make myself really focus in and hone in on where is the learning here? Where is the training and development? Where is the investment going? Um, Not only when you're thinking about opening new retail stores, but who's training the people going into those stores? Who's training the people in the corporate environment? And are they educated in retail stores so that they understand what the lifestyle is like in a retail environment? It is so different. It is not for everyone. And and it's hard. It's a lot of hard work. And you need to make sure you are recognizing that and that you're not um just continuously asking people for more, but you're stopping, pausing, recognizing, and then you can ask for more.
I want to go back to what you were saying about this notion of brand promise. It seems like the real linchpin of what you're talking about here. What does it mean for a brand to break its brand promise? What does that look like?
I think a lot of it is shiny objects. A lot of it is, when you're living quarter to quarter in a public business, you may make some decisions. And instead of just testing them, you roll them out. And what if you don't have commitment from the organization because that isn't necessarily what they understood the brand promise to be. It's moving the guardrails, right? And you have a mission, you have a vision, most businesses do. They try to stick to it, maybe. But do they then need to revisit that mission and vision in order to make sure that they can keep that brand promise?
And how do you get that commitment from the organization?
I think you communicate. I think you put words into action. I think you engage. You engage all areas of the business. There's not one part of a business that's more or less important to the other, or it shouldn't exist. So I think when brands think about, where they put their time and energy and investment, a lot of times it's not in learning or training. And to me, that is where you get a really big return because turnover is expensive. Constantly trying to find new talent is expensive. And it doesn't always work. And it's every time you bring somebody new into a business, are you bringing them in to enhance the business or are you bringing them in to disrupt the business?
You said there's so much to unpack in everything you said. So where do I go from here? I mean, there's something I want to ask about engagement. There's something I want to ask you about the cost of turnover. Where should we go? I guess does that get captured anywhere? I feel like it's one of these things where let's go with cost of turnover and how expensive it could be to replace talent. Does that ever get taken into consideration beforehand, or is it always like a post-mortem conversation? Like we talk about it only once it's happened and how expensive it's been. Or do we ever think about investment in terms of potential cost of replacement?
Again, in a startup, probably not because everybody's moving so quickly and then they have to kind of like post-mortem and debrief after, like, why didn't this person work out or what could we have done? I think when you're in a more organized company that has a human resources department that's valued. And here's another thing, right? Human resources is critical. It's a critical part of a business for many, many reasons. And usually it doesn't have a seat at the table strategically. And I'd like human resources to have a seat at the table strategically. I go back to my days of Liz Claiborne Group and VF Corporation. There was somebody from human resources on the board or part of the quarterlies. And the people component was really critical. And to me, that's where I came from. That's the learning that I've had. Going and being educated in organizational development is where does the training and leading come from? And a lot of times it's coming from your retail operations group, it's coming from your human resources group, or it's been sidelined.
And what are some green flags that you see that, um, aside from a board seat or presence in a quarterly meeting, what are other green flags you see where you're like, okay, this organization takes human resources seriously?
Yeah, when there is a path, there's a training program, there's visibility and line of sight. Um, there's learning going on in an organization. There's books being passed around, right? There's idea generation. There's sharing. There are town halls. There's just the ability for people to use their voice. And I know that's really hard when you're in these sort of hybrid worlds today. But here you and we're using our voice, right? We're having this conversation. It's as easy as that. It's allowing people to have avenues to share their voice, Teams chats, Slack chats. All of those things allow people to kind of ask questions, be together, workshops, panels, inviting other organizations into yours I also think is a great way to share because you get pretty insular in a brand. So bringing in an outside speaker, bringing in other businesses that might be either like-minded or have a different way of doing something, I think all of that is part of an investment. And it's not a huge investment. It's just making sure that it's valued in the organization.
Mm, mm. And it also increases engagement, which to your point earlier was,
Completely,
yeah.
completely. I've never been in an interview where I haven't asked, what does your training look like? What can I expect the onboarding to be like? What would my first year entail? What's the investment? Because I know what I can bring to a business, but I also know if this is a new business for me, how am I going to learn more about it unless there's an organized approach?
Yeah, I feel like onboarding is often an unsung hero uh, in engaging and retaining talent. What are some best practices you've seen with regards to onboarding?
I'm very much of a train the trainer philosophy. I love peer to peer training. I also love people to be able to, if there's a cool corporate environment, to spend some time there. If there's great stores, to be in them. People to understand where the business is, what are the revenue generators for a business. I've been doing some work with museum stores, spending time in the museum and understanding the sort of the cultural aspect of this. Like there's just really cool ways, going and seeing if you're something where you have tailors or experts in manufacturing and craftsmanship, people being able to explore that or be a part of that, I think deepens the relationship with the business.
I was just at the Dior Museum, and one of the rooms was you got to ask questions to a tailor and touch fabrics and, learn and appreciate their craft. I'm sure they have that as part of their onboarding as
Yeah,
well, but
think
it
about
definitely did.
Apple.
Yeah.
Apple
Uh,
has the Genius Bar, right?
yeah.
And
Mm.
and there's a place for the consumer and people working in the business to go and participate. And I think that sort of brand participation is really cool.
Going back on the point of engagement, I think I read somewhere some very high statistic. It's from Gallup. I should probably double check this number. It was something 87% of engagements like related to the manager. Um, and I was just thinking, what do you see as the role of managers? How do you evaluate that? What does good management look like to you?
Good management is knowledge and expertise and being able to talk to something credibly that you're a part of. In a company, you should be able to go to someone and ask them, hey, what's this business all about? And there should be clarity there. I think in the management aspect of it is making sure that everyone knows how to access that information, um, how to find out more about the business that they're in. The, I'm a big networker. I love for they call me a people weaver. I love putting people together that might not necessarily spend time together, and they can share those ideas. And does the story of the business and operations mean the same thing to the story of the finance team? And that alignment to me is really important.
I mean, if we were to take a step back, I mean, Ember is unique in that they have somebody in the talent advisory role. But, other funds who are, maybe they'll have an ex consultant looking at operations and an ex finance person looking at finance. You know, what is lost when you don't have somebody in talent?
I think that question's interesting because everybody's sort of in talent in a sense, right? Even if you're in finance, even if you're in, the M&A world, um, you need partners. It's very few stand alone. Part of why I'm a part of Ember Company and was part of Dalmore Company, it's really sad and lonely to just be a solo consultant, a solo advisor, because you're limited. You're limited in your capabilities. You may not think you are, but you are. There are other experts. And, Embers, there's 8 people, and we're very complementary because everyone has their specialization, if you will, but there's also a listening board, right? There's room for people to ask questions, to think about ways of doing things. Especially, we have 65 brands in the portfolio that are all coming from different walks of life, and you have serial entrepreneurs, and you have founders, and you have people that are all different life stages of brand, and being able to be open and kind of work through all of that, to me, is the excitement of it all. I think some people love numbers, right? They just do. Some people love the art of the strategy. I'm all about the talent and what people are bringing to this brand or business, and are they valued for doing that.
And I know you've talked about it already, um, but like tell me more about how you see people being valued.
I think, first of all, that they're there, right? That what their role is. Um, no, I think people being valued are, you really need to ask them. I think for me to say somebody is or isn't, that's a personal question for that person. And what does value mean to them? And hopefully the business can answer that. Sometimes it's, the financial excitement of the company, but a lot of times it's also, is your day to day something you expected it to be? In retail, I can never make a promise to someone that they're going to have a day like they did the day before, or that they're going to have a day like the day next, because that's what retail is, right? It's never static. It's constantly challenging you, because the consumer is constantly asking for more. So you need people in a business that can provide that have that energy, that have that curiosity to make things happen. If you're waiting for something to happen, chances are it's not going to, or it's going to happen the way you didn't want it to. So if you become part of that 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 sort of action, that to me is value. That's added value.
And you were mentioning earlier that you have 45 companies, roughly 45 companies in your portfolio.
They run, it's really interesting, from technology to fashion to travel, um, to every generation, from child to mature, right? And it's just a really great group of brands. We have Nottam Cashmere, Soul Guard, Hill House, Magnetic Me, Light Phone. It's just this really cool group of brands that, the two founders, Avani Patel and Matt Jung, have really amassed these relationships to be able to put them all within the sort of Ember construct.
And I mean, with 45, I mean, are there themes that emerge in terms of, maybe not challenges, but typical themes or topics that come up across the board when it comes to talent?
When it comes to talent, it also comes to why those brands are in the portfolio. And a lot of it is under better for you, better for the planet. So if that is sort of a litmus test, it's making sure that those things live and breathe within the business, within the brand. Financial stability, huge in all of them, right? And, with a lot of the unexpected turns that retail has been very challenged with, from, the early 2000s forward. I think that is part of the everyday, the investor world has changed and shifted. Um, the expectation, as we talked about earlier, on EBITDA and the focus on performance, that should not be at odds with how you train and develop people.
If you were to talk about a baseline that you would like all your portfolio companies to have in terms of a philosophy or standard or practice for talent management, or for their the people functions, human resources in general, what does that baseline look like for you? Like, what would make you happy when you look across a portfolio and be like, at a minimum, like, this is what I would expect from an Ember company brand?
That's great. That is a super cool question. Thank you. I would say it's being eyes wide open, and not wishful thinking. I think a lot of times entrepreneurs they're dreamers, right? They're very excited about what comes next. But I always think about what's here and your core, and what are your core values? Because core values to me are everything. Even going back to the body shop, where it really was, trying to be the very best that you could be. It's not saying you are, it's saying you're trying. And I love brands and businesses and founders that want to be the best version of their business, that want to be, that know that there's still so much growth, whether it's personally or professionally. I think that's a great base, that you're in the business for the right reason. There's so much short-term thinking right now. The whole, like, give me, gimme, gimme, gimme. I just want to make money. I've actually never succeeded in those environments. It's not for me. There are other people, there's other businesses, there's other leaders who maybe, that's the world they want to be a part of. It's really slowed me down when I have.
Somewhat related. I mean, what would you say is the next big challenge in front of you when it comes to the people space that you're excited to tackle?
That's great. It has to be the fear of AI, right? It just does. It has to be a reckoning of what AI is and what it is not, what it can do and what it shouldn't do. Again, I'm fortunate to be in a space where you need storytellers. People want to engage. The retail stores is actually now on an upward trajectory. People want to go, yeah, they do. People want to go back to retailing. They want to be in store. Yes, they still spend time shopping online, but they want a physical place, a sanctuary. And I think that's what retail stores should be for brands. And in order to create a sanctuary, you need people who can do that, who can create that experience. I worked with Rachel Sheckman, who was the founder of Story, and she had this great KPI called experiences per square foot.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Tell me more
It,
about
it
that.
wasn't just financial KPIs. It was, what is somebody walking into? What are they experiencing? And what do they feel like when they leave? And it's funny because Rachel put it into words, but for me, that's who I've been my entire career, is to be of service. When I'm asked to do something, to me, it's always, okay, who am I going to work with on this? It's never, what's the technology that's going to get me there? That comes along, but it's really, who can I partner with? Who do I ask for help with on this?
And do you think that an AI can't replace that or can't do the whole thing?
I'm hopefully optimistic that it cannot. I do think absolutely are benefits of efficiency and streamlining. But when you use a word like streamlining people, it feels very, yeah, like an ick factor.
like factors of production, or what does it mean? Like,
again, I'm not in that environment. I'm not running factories. I'm not running, but I also think there's a humanity to AI that people need to be really, really aware of. Or if you get it wrong, you're just going to have a bunch of ill-informed folks.
and it goes back to what you're saying about what's the brand promise, and where does the brand promise, to me, as you described, it sounds so intimate, that what's the role in AI and that brand promise?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it. If you're a brand where I never want to see you, I never want to hear from you, I never want to know anything about you, I never want to feel anything about you, AI may be the way, right? But in a retail environment, or one that has aspirations and dreams, how do you get that across in an AI environment? I'm so excited every time I talk to you, every time we're together. It's just the energy is so cool.
Yeah,
And your background is so cool. And,
yeah.
what you're doing with your podcast to me is something where you are directly giving people information about what's happening in the industry.
Thank you. I'm very fond of you, as you know. I always enjoy talking. I always enjoy our meetups wherever they may be in the world. And yeah, I hope we could hang out again in person soon.
Let's do that very soon.